Right, so if you're about my age, 31 years old, and you went to high school around 2005 to 2010, then there is a very good chance that at one point you were a fan of a band called N-Dubz. They were almost like the UK's answer to R&B music during the early to late 2000s, and the band consisted of cousins Dappy and Tulisa, as well as their childhood friend Phaser. And for a few years, they had UK teenagers on lock. I was about 12, 11 maybe when I first listened to them, and I believe that they had a big cultural impact around the time because kids would start dressing like them, wearing these hats that have now aged like dry milk that Dappy used to wear. Their songs would be getting played on buses and trains, whether the other passengers that were on board liked it or not. There were certain words and phrases that were associated with them. If you said to someone "nana nai" around that time, which to a lot of people would mean absolutely nothing, they might know that you were talking about N-Dubz. And these were just normal kids from a rough Camden council estate who ended up selling over 1.3 million records. They've sold millions of tickets for shows, became household names, X Factor judges, reality TV stars, and much, much more, until one day it just all stopped. Because on the 28th of November 2011, the band released their final album, N-Dubz The Greatest Hits, and then they silently parted ways. And with a fan base as hardcore as the N-Dubz ones were, there was no way that they were just going to be able to sail off into the sunset and not give a reason. Eventually, Tulisa ended up saying that the band were going to be taking a 2-year hiatus to focus on solo project. Well, that 2-year hiatus turned into an 11-year hiatus. From arrests to sex tapes, from death threats by band members to supply of Class A's. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the complex history of one of the biggest bands to come out of the UK in my lifetime, N-Dubz. But people, before we do, welcome back to Joey's Corner. Thank you so much for all of you guys that are supporting the channel at the moment. I'm overwhelmed by all the comments. I'm trying to get back to people, but there's just so many. I'm really happy. This channel couldn't have happened at a better time for me personally. It's given me something to focus on, and I absolutely love it. Please do me a massive favour, hype the video if you're able to. If you're not able to, like the video. If you're not able to do that, share the video. If you're not able to do that, maybe get the handle of my YouTube name tattooed on you or something like that. Anyway, let's get into it. Right, so bearing in mind that all of the band members were born just before the 90s, then you're probably going to be surprised to know that we have to go back all the way to 1970 to actually tell you about the start of N-Dubz. Because hardcore N-Dubz fans will definitely remember the album Uncle B. Well, Uncle B was actually Byron Contostavlos, and he was actually the bass guitarist for British rock band Mungo Jerry, who you may or may not know, but you probably will once you listen to this banger. In the summertime, when the weather is hot, when the weather's fine, you got women on your mind. Have a drink, have a drive, go out and see what you can find. My dad loves that tune. Anyway, Byron, 17 odd years later after that song was recorded, had himself a son called Konstantinos, who we all now know as Dappy. And Byron's brother was also a musician. I believe that he was also a part of Mungo Jerry, and a year later, he has himself a daughter called Tula Paunia, who we now know as Tulisa. So now it's clear that the kids come from a musical family, and therefore it's probably an obvious path that they went straight in to the music industry. Not quite, because Dappy kind of had other plans. He was a talented musician. He had realised, and everyone around him had realised, that he was way more talented than anyone at that age. But at the same time as that, Dappy's priorities were often in other places, and those other places were often getting up to no good. He already had a criminal record long before N-Dubz ever hit the charts, and I believe that was actually for carrying a knife. He admitted himself that he was expelled from schools and in his words used to fight every day, and therefore his dad probably knew at this point that he was going to have to take some real influence on his son's life, because his environment wasn't going to lead him anywhere good, in my opinion. Because Camden was rough at that time, in the late 90s and the early 2000s. I mean, literally, Anthony Hardy, the Camden Ripper, was a serial killer going about killing people in Camden. It was a hub for crime, for dealing, for stealing, for thieving. All of these things weren't irregular in Camden. Neither were stabbings, neither were shootings, neither were gang violence, and also it had a red light district. It had a big sex trade industry, which you can imagine will always attract the wrong uns of society. And one of the final straws is Dappy getting kicked out of the 4th, 5th school, something like that. At this point, his dad knows that he needs to do something. Luckily, Dappy was actually able to get into another school in Camden, and when he joined this school, he sees an old friend of his, a mate of his called Richard, that he used to go to karate classes with. Him and that lad, Richard Rawson, become best friends at school, and we now know Richard Rawson as Phaser. And with Byron, aka Uncle B, Dappy's dad, worrying that his son's drift towards street and gang life was getting too intense, he decided to build a recording studio. He knew how to do it, and definitely from his time in the industry would have had connections, and he spent all of his time doing this so that his son could rap. And after dedicating all of his time to building this studio, it was eventually complete. And this is where Dappy and Phaser's journey initially started. Tulisa, not quite. We'll get onto her. Because Dappy gets in the studio and he starts recording a few bits of Phaser, he starts recording a few bits on his own, and he wants to become a solo artist. He thinks he's the bollocks at the time, and that's the sort of confidence that you do definitely need to make it in the industry, especially when you're young like that. But Uncle B, Dappy's dad, he's been in the industry. He's been around the block. He's worn the t-shirts. He's sold out shows and performed at big gigs, and he felt that both a backup male vocalist and especially a female singer were needed. Now, the second vocalist was obviously always going to be Phaser. Him and Dappy were already rapping together, and you can tell from their lyrics and their flows and stuff like that they definitely used to write their lyrics together, because a lot of the N-Dubz tunes, for people that remember this, were like conversational lyrics and stuff like that. You can't really do that unless you're sat in a studio writing lyrics together. But as I say, Byron, Uncle B, still feels like they need a female vocalist. So Dappy and Phaser start telling him that there's this girl at their school and she is the shit, basically. She's known as the best singer in the whole school. And what they do is they arrange for her to come and do an audition, to do a couple of hours work where she's doing some vocals on their tunes, and then they think that they're going to be able to use that to be able to produce a mixtape or something like that. There's a problem though. The girl never turns up, missing out on what could have potentially been, a whole career in the industry. I'd love to know what happened to that girl. I wonder whether she became a singer. But when she didn't turn up, they realised that they still needed someone. And they needed someone quick, because they wanted to crack on. They had already made the studio and they wanted to start putting work out. And that's when Dappy convinces Uncle B to give his niece, Tulisa, a call. And this was pretty much a final roll of the dice. Not because Tulisa was unproven, and not because Tulisa couldn't sing. Tulisa very much could sing, and Tulisa very much had ambitions also of having a solo career. But at just 13 years old at the time, Uncle B and Dappy and everyone else were said to have not really wanted to have bothered Tulisa too much, because quite tragically, in my opinion, she was looking after her mother, who was very unwell from a mental standpoint, I believe. Tulisa had had a very rough upbringing, to be fair. One that would have been even rougher if it hadn't have been for Uncle B, the father of Dappy, Byron, who she has credited as acting like a father figure to her. Anyway, desperate times call for desperate measures. So they go over there, Byron has a chat with her and says, T, come on, come down to the studio, I'll give you 20 quid. Tulisa, business-minded even back then, says make it 50 and I'll do it. So 50 quid at that age, 13 years old, back in God knows the early 2000s, is too much money to turn down. Tulisa heads to the studio and they start recording material, but not under the name N-Dubz. Their original band name was the Lickle Rinser Crew. After that, they changed it to NW and then NW1, obviously a reference to their postcode Camden, and then eventually they became N-Dubz. But it was about 5 years or so before N-Dubz ever released a tune that any of us were able to listen to. So what was going on in the meantime? Well, they were recording stuff and they were putting it out at the time, but you got to remember, YouTube was hardly about in them days, and that means that a lot of it has now been lost. But luckily for you, I've found some of it. Yeah, so NW1 they were by this point. How young they look, man. I wonder how old Tulisa is there. She looks like she could be like 14 or something, I reckon. They're decent. I mean, it's not the sort of thing that I would be listening to now. But even at this point, before N-Dubz were a thing, they were kind of decent. They were alright, they weren't bad. Right, I've heard enough of that one anyway. Let's listen to some other stuff they put out. Because by August 2006, they had definitely upped their game. They were still very raw and needed a lot of fine-tuning, but the material they were putting out clearly had an audience and clearly had a demand. And they dropped You Better Not Waste My Time in August 2006. And then, just 1 month later, they dropped a tune that made the band explode into the consciousness of most people that I know. And that song was called I Swear. When you would tie me to a chair and tease me from the back of my neck out to my ears, but that was at the time. I see her kissing some other guy under now you and I. Yeah, we shared something special. Why you give me one more try? Then you two got me going and I just early morning coming home at 5:34. Phaser was a good rapper, mate. I think he was the best rapper out of all of them. I thought they were your new Nikes. Take me for a fool, I don't wear shoes like these. I know you got a man up in his. Why the fuck you lying? This was a banger. You can't tell me that was not a banger. I might be 31 years old, right? I'm uncle status for some people now, but I still think it's a good tune. Because when this tune dropped, yeah, I was in year 8 at school, and you have to remember, I'm ancient. No, I'm joking. No, I'm just saying, like, back in those days, YouTube wasn't really around. I think it had been founded, I think it had been invented, but it wasn't the go-to place to access music. Spotify wasn't about. iTunes, I think, was just about around, and that meant that if you were listening to music of this sort of genre, then your go-to places would probably be downloading it off LimeWire. If anyone remembers LimeWire, it was a bit of software that basically slowly gave your computer aids. Infrared. We used to hold our phones together. It's like a Bluetooth type thing, and you could swap it from there. Watching Channel U. Anyone that remembers this sort of era back in the day will remember that Channel U used to play a lot of N-Dubz when they were on the way up. Tiny Temper before he became famous, Skepta before he became really famous, Tinchy Strider, all of these sort of people, as well as other people that didn't end up blowing up. MySpace and Bebo were both big social media apps at the time, and therefore the music was shared a lot on there. And also, you could just go to like Vauxhall Market and places like that and buy pirate copies of the CDs. What I'm saying is, N-Dubz were a hit. Boys liked them. Girls liked them. And for me, I'm probably going to say that they would lean into the chav demographic. That's a word that I fucking hate. It's a word that I got called every single day at school. And I'm not accusing them of being chavs, but the point I'm trying to make, right, is like, if you were listening to N-Dubz on your way to school, you probably weren't listening to fucking Slipknot on your way back from school. The chavs liked N-Dubz, the emos liked Slipknot. Anyway, just a month later, they dropped their best tune, in my opinion, Ouch. Her name's Shaniqua, and what?
Do you think you is going?
Banger.
Brown skin beauty had to get it back. I understand shop sexual and I'm from the slum. I will never stand for that thing.
Underneath the bridge with a fake looking twat. Had to do some dirty work in order to be able to take out you and put some food on the table. Oh, I should join. I'm gonna apply. Hidden money from the drawer. Done the right thing was to hand me up on the floor. Yes, these lot were fucking sick. Oh, I hope none of my mates are watching this video because they're gonna fucking terrorize me for listening to N-Dubz. But listen, for me, that was kind of the peak of music. Do you know what I mean? So you go back in the day or whatever, I don't know how far back, but say there was a graph, yeah, and it's going up. You got Frank Sinatra in there, Elvis Presley, Michael Jackson, and then Ouch by N-Dubz kind of hits the top, and then I think music kind of declined overall globally since then, but you know, that's just my opinion. And I'll tell you what, right, N-Dubz were a bunch of fucking workhorses, because in the space of 12 odd months they dropped 4 singles, an album entitled Uncle B in tribute to their Uncle Byron, a man whose input was the sole reason really that the band even existed. And where I've been enjoying reminiscing on N-Dubz a little bit, this is the point where we probably need to bring the tone down to a level to talk about Uncle B himself, because Byron Stavlos actually passed away from a very sudden and unexpected heart attack in 2007, and I can only begin to imagine the effect that this must have had on the band members. Uncle B was the reason that they formed, and he was the reason that they stuck at it. And in my opinion, he was the sole reason that Dappy, his son, ended up touring the country and not spending time in prison cells. And his poor son, Dappy, man, like, he was actually the one that found Uncle B, his dad, on the sofa with a TV remote, apparently, in his hand. He said in an interview that he was watching Channel U, watching it to wait for N-Dubz to be shown because they were all over it at the time. And it said that Dappy actually tried to administer CPR to his father, but it was too late. And yeah, this is probably the moment for me when N-Dubz gained a lot more support from just teenagers, young adults, stuff like that. To be honest, they probably gained support from the British public around this time, because being part of Mungo Jerry, Uncle B was fairly well known, and instead of feeling defeated, they worked extra hard to honour him, which they did almost immediately. Instead of sitting around and grieving, which they were well within their rights to do, they did what Uncle B would have wanted them to do, and that was to crack on. That was to fulfill his dream for the band. And within just a month or two, they released the album entitled Uncle B. And this album had some good tunes on it, I won't lie, but at the same time, I'm going to be honest and give my opinion, this was at a time when N-Dubz had blown up massively. They were signing big brand deals. They were at a point where they were now getting bookings for concerts, and when you do that, you can enhance the amount of money that you're able to earn significantly by being a bit more PG friendly, meaning that your concert doesn't have to be over 16s or over 18s or anything like that. And what ends up happening, in my opinion, is it kind of filters down into the music itself, and therefore maybe that's where the phrase watered down comes from, I don't know. But anyway, the music did start to get a little bit watered down. It started to get a little bit less raw, but don't get me wrong, it still had some bangers on that album. Love for My Slum was a good one. Defeat You featuring Chipmunk, that was an absolute banger. Probably the best song from the album would have to be Papa Can You Hear Me, which was a song in tribute to Uncle B.
If you've lost any loved ones, you feel what I'm saying. The opus peaceful down there where they lay. Now we're picking up awards while he's under the ground. My daddy this and my daddy that. When I found mine dead on the couch on my fly, only time I talk to him's when I look into the sky. Ain't no way in the world this halfway. We're N-Dubz. If it wasn't for you, B, there wouldn't be N-Dubz. Moving on to mobiles, pushing the bends up. It's like we sacrificed your life for the love of success and a life full of stress.
This was an emotional video. Like, this was the first time I remember really ever feeling sad at an N-Dubz song.
Of ya, and your light blue black down knock ya. Things in my house still smell of ya. Papa, if you can hear me.
Yeah, I think that personally for me was probably the most powerful video that N-Dubz ever did, because it's a clear homage, isn't it? And it really is a video where they're being open and raw about the fact that they are still massively hurting from the loss. And this was in the kind of immediate aftermath that they would have wrote this together. And I'm sure a lot of tears would have been shed around those sessions when they were writing and recording that tune. And you know what, right? Maybe I'm just guilty of overhyping N-Dubz here because I listened to them as a child. But what absolutely shocked me was the fact that I found out officially they've never had a #1 single. So all them N-Dubz bangers that we can remember never even reached #1 in the UK charts. They didn't get anywhere near in the US charts or anything like that. But there might be some confusion because there were 2 #1 singles, right? The first one was ironically called #1.
I don't understand how you're #1 when it was just a fling before. Now you're the one.
Anyway, it was Tinchy Strider's song, and N-Dubz were a feature on that song. It was a fucking banger. Pretty much a year to the day of the album Uncle B, they released their next album, Against All Odds, in 2009. But I gotta be honest, by 2009, I'd started going out drinking, going to clubs and stuff like that, and the ones that I was going to weren't playing those sort of tunes. They were playing these sort of tunes. Oh, what a fucking banger. Anyway, the Against All Odds album, it had a few alright tunes on it. I Need You was a decent-ish tune. Playing with Fire, I think they had one that had Wiley featured on it. It was decent. It reached #6 in the UK charts, which surprises me because that actually means it got a lot higher than the Uncle B album. And that album was one that I rated way more than this one. Their album the next year, Love Live Life, reached #7 in the UK charts. But I'll be honest, I don't know any songs from this one, so I can't really comment. But let's speak about why the band actually split. Because although there were many controversies, there were kind of always controversies with N-Dubz, and no one got outright cancelled. So was it the controversies, or was it just due to fallings out between family members and even romantic relationships? Let's get into all of it, and let's start off with Dappy. And like I said, there was already history with Dappy. He was known to the police. He had been arrested for carrying a weapon. He had allegedly beaten up a taxi driver, and he had had to do community service for that. He was fined, I believe, for spitting in a woman's face. But all of these events or incidents that I'm telling you about here did take place before N-Dubz had become one of the bigger bands in the UK. However, once Dappy was famous, the controversies continued. It was said that there was a BBC programme and a woman was on it and she was calling Dappy an idiot, she was slagging him off, and apparently he used some connections to get this woman's phone number from the BBC, and then he tried to call her. He sent her abusive text messages, and one of them said, "You dumb fucking shithead, you gonna die," amongst other threatening texts. And the problem is, you got to remember, N-Dubz had brand deals. N-Dubz were part of campaigns. One of those campaigns was an anti-bullying campaign called Are You Cyber Safe? They immediately dropped N-Dubz because it wasn't good PR, was it? Their primary audience, N-Dubz, would have been anywhere really between 10 and 18 or something like that, so that sort of behaviour was frowned upon. And to be fair, after that incident is when N-Dubz went about doing this sort of silent split. I say silent because they were still very much visible. Dappy was in the media, Tulisa was in the media. In fact, he had just brought out his first solo single, No Regrets, which peaked at number 1, knocking One Direction off of the top of the chart. So the two N-Dubz related number 1s that I'm on about officially never even came from N-Dubz. One was Tinchy Stryder and one was Dappy as a solo artist. By the way, speaking of One Direction, Tulisa by this point has landed herself a job as one of the judges on the panel on the X Factor, the same show that formed the band One Direction. She was just 22 years old at the time of that. That's mad to look back on it. Like, I'm 31 now, and to be sat amongst Gary Barlow and Simon Cowell and stuff like that or whatever would even make me feel a bit strange, uncomfortable, I don't know. So, fair play to Tulisa. And what was Fazer doing? Well, he was probably spending a lot of time being proud of his girlfriend, Tulisa. Yeah, this is the thing that I haven't yet told you, because from 2010 onwards, Fazer and Tulisa were an item, having gone from childhood friends to lovers, and although Tulisa was now busy with the X Factor work, that didn't matter because Fazer was busy. He was writing music for both himself, but also for established artists. Tulisa actually won the X Factor, not as a contestant, but as one of the mentors. So each group or act has mentors, and the winners of that season were Little Mix, who Tulisa was mentoring. And at this point, despite the breakup, all three of them are doing really well. They're all doing well for money at this point. Dappy and Tulisa were both in the media doing really well, and as for Fazer, he was more in the background, but that's probably what he wanted to do, or at least that's my assumption based on his personality. And it almost seemed around this time, right, like nothing could go wrong. Well, that's when it started to. Tulisa and Fazer actually split due to the schedules becoming just way too hectic, where they had gone from kids on a council estate that saw each other every single day to full-blown celebrities. But that is not the controversy I'm talking about, because in 2012, Dappy was involved in a big petrol station brawl. So the Telegraph reported that around 3 a.m, Dappy pulls up with a few of his pals at a petrol station, and he tries to approach a couple of 19-year-old women that are sat there. They are on their own. I think they're waiting to go home, and he's saying, why don't you get in the car with us? Why don't you come back with us? But basically, the women reject Dappy, and they actually allegedly told him that they thought he was boring, and that's when he is said to have launched into like a verbal tirade against the women. When that happens, a man named David Jenkins steps in to help the women. He puts Dappy in a headlock, apparently, but that was a bad mistake for him. Well, I don't ever want to say bad mistake, because he was protecting women, but it didn't end well is what I'm trying to say, because then Dappy's entourage and his security and stuff like that basically battered this man and a couple of his mates. Jenkins, the man who was trying to defend the women, was left with several broken teeth. One of his friends that was trying to defend him had his nose broken, and another one got punched in the eye and had a swollen eye. And Dappy ended up getting a suspended prison sentence for that. And there were a lot of people that felt a lot of negativity towards Dappy at this time because of the fact that he was seen as a role model. And I understand that Dappy himself would have probably rejected those role model claims, and he was definitely shifting his music. He was definitely becoming way less PG and stuff like that once he had gone off on his solo career. But the point I would make is that he did benefit a lot from all of the streams and all of the ticket sales and all of the revenue that was generated by his younger fans. So when you accept that money, you kind of do have to accept your little bit of responsibility as a role model. But just after this, Dappy releases the song Rockstar, which peaks at number 2. And it shows that just as much as there's there's a lot of drama and stuff like that going on in Dappy's life, he's still very much capable of making high-profile hits. Now, Tulisa was doing well, and she released her debut single, Young. I don't really rate the song, but I definitely rate the cover of it by James Arthur. He used it for his X Factor audition. I've never looked at the view count on YouTube. I would assume that James Arthur's cover of it has way more views than Tulisa's original video of it. James Arthur's version of it was way better. And around that time, when Tulisa was a judge and James Arthur was on the X Factor, was the same sort of time that a lot of the controversy started for Tulisa. Because years before Tulisa had become a judge on the X Factor, she was with a fella named Justin Edwards, aka MC Ultra. Most of you wouldn't heard of him, some of you might, but in comparison to N-Dubz, he was tiny. Now, when the pair split, it was Ultra himself that took to Twitter to announce that they had parted, but they were still friends and they were on good terms. Well, I don't need friends like MC fucking Ultra, if that's what he defines as friends. Because a few years later, right as Tulisa reached her peak, MC Ultra did something very, very scummy. 3 years exactly after the pair split up, a sex tape hits the internet of Tulisa performing an act on a man whose face isn't in the camera, but was later confirmed to be Justin Edwards, aka MC Ultra. Now, MC Ultra knew a man named Chris Herbert. Chris Herbert was actually the man who created or co-created the Spice Girls. All these people in the industry are just all linked, aren't they? And this Chris Herbert and MC Ultra decide that it would be a good idea to leak the sex tape, to sell the sex tape, and therefore to be able to cash out on Tulisa's fame. Because we all know if Tulisa wasn't famous, they never would have done this. And in fact, it's said that the Spice Girls manager fella, I can't even remember his name now, had told MC Ultra that they were likely to earn around £4 million from doing so. And MC Ultra is one lucky fucking loser, I'll tell you that. And I've got no problem with calling this man a loser, because I think he would have the exact same opinion if someone did what he did to Tulisa to a potential daughter of his or child of his one day. It's scumbag behaviour. But the reason I say he's so lucky is because the actual revenge corn act that came in was only a few years after that. Meaning if he had done that a few years later, especially with it being high profile, this fella would have served prison time. Stephen Bear, the Big Brother winner, remember him? He did a similar thing and he served prison time for it. But instead of just dining out off the fact that he had once been with Tulisa, that wasn't enough. He chose to betray her and to do something that is irreversible, to try and gain finances from releasing that video. And this is the absolute joke of this situation. Tulisa took MC Ultra. She took the Spice Girls creator, creep guy, and a couple of others to the High Court, and it resulted in a confession from MC Ultra after his original denial in a police interview, and an apology from MC Ultra, and that's it. That's all that happened. What a fucking joke that is. As I say, Stephen Bear went to prison for doing something similar to this, and this guy and the Spice Girls guy just got away with it. And if you thought that the controversy would end there for Tulisa, then you were very much wrong. Because just a year or two later, she would be hitting the headlines once again for all of the wrong reasons. And this is where an undercover journalist called Mazir Mahmood comes into the story. A man who styled himself as the King of Sting. Now, football fans may remember him for stinging Sven-Goran Eriksson. He basically dressed up as a sheikh and went into a meeting with him. I think he said that he was rich and he was going to buy Aston Villa, and that he would be able to pay Sven way more than the FA were paying him for the England job, and he got him to admit that he would take the job. He also got him to say some things about his players that, yeah, didn't look good after context was given. There was a lot of stuff that went on. And to be honest, this was just standard UK tabloid media in the 2000s. It's fucking shady stuff, isn't it? But anyway, In 2013, he tricks Tulisa into believing that he is investing in a big Hollywood movie and he wants her as the female lead, and that the male lead has already been confirmed to be Leonardo DiCaprio. He said that Tulisa would be getting around $3.5 million for her role in the movie, and in March of 2013, he flies her out first class to Las Vegas to discuss the movie. And this is when, in my opinion, Mahmood manipulated and entrapped the 24-year-old Tulisa. The story goes something along the lines of Mahmood telling Tulisa that the film was going to feature a sort of ghetto London girl, and he was asking her, like, are you able to tap into that character? Which obviously Tulisa is from Camden, a council estate, and she's like, yeah, of course I can. And probably as a way to show that she's able to, they start swapping war stories and stuff like that. He's asking her questions. Oh, have you ever seen this happen? What's the craziest thing that's happened? Do you know these people? Do you know people that have been to prison and stuff like that? And it eventually lands on a conversation where he says to her, would she be able to sort him some marching powder? The devil's dandruff. Yeah, Tony Montana's creatine. I don't know what I can call it, but I definitely can't call it what it's actually called on here. Now, this is the thing, right? She didn't even do it, in my opinion. She gave him the number of a mate. And I'm going to say right now, call me what you want, right? Every single one of you sitting here watching this right now, maybe not every single one, 99% of you, whether you would do it or not, all have a number in your phone that 1,000,000% has someone that can get you some of that on it. So was she naive? Yeah, probably. Is it morally right that she gave him the number? No, probably not. But am I going to judge a 24-year-old girl after she was clearly manipulated, lied to, flown to another country and deceived? No, I'm not. I'm not going to judge her on that. Because Mahmood, right, was sold about 820 quid's worth of Charlie. Now, if you know anything about that, what you'll know is if they're selling it for £10 a point, then that was only 8.2 grams. That's not even enough to go to fucking prison. It's probably not even enough to get nicked for. I mean, you'd get nicked for it, yeah, in the UK, but they would put it down as personal use, and if you didn't have a criminal record, you'd get a slap on the wrist. And also, we don't even know if it was 8.2 grams, because if I'm the dealer and someone says, yeah, this fucking rich fella that's flown in from Las Vegas wants some, obviously you're going to up your prices. It could have been about 4 grams that he gave him. But that's not the point that I'm making, and I'm not condoning it, but at the same time, Tulisa's hardly Pablo fucking Escobar, is she? She gave someone a number of someone else. Bad decision, fair play, but it doesn't make her a bad person. Although at the same time as saying that, I do understand why she immediately was dropped from her role as a judge on The X Factor. Tulisa was arrested and charged with intent to supply Class A, but it was quickly dropped because for me, it was clear entrapment. I'm not trying to say Tulisa had no responsibility, but I'll just lay my cards on the table and tell you I feel really sorry for the girl. She didn't get stopped in the street and asked for some gear, did she? She got groomed and handed over a phone number to someone. Is it really that big a deal? Because the police didn't think that it was that big a deal. The man who sold the substances, Mike GLC, he never got in no trouble for it. The funny thing about it, for me, was it became so high profile that the police decided to investigate into Mahmood, the fake sheikh. And once they did, they unravelled so much about him that he was sent to prison. And I'm just going to be honest here. I did feel really sorry for Tulisa, to be fair, because a lot of the stuff that happened you could argue was in her control, but a lot of the stuff that happened was kind of half out of her control as well. She had also just lost an uncle that was a father figure to her when she needed one, because she had a mother who at the time was medically unwell, and Tulisa, who was a child, was looking after her. And then when you finally make it to the top, all of your dreams then come crashing down. She had someone she loved betray her in one of the worst possible ways, in my opinion, in that MC Ultra guy. And remember, Tulisa and Phaser both bore a lot of the brunt for some of the things that Dappy did that they weren't even involved in. I can very much understand her frustration and mental deterioration around that point. And over the next few years, Dappy's still touring, but he is still getting in trouble quite often. He keeps getting in these sort of nightclub fights. It was said that he attacked a man inside Chicago's nightclub in Chelmsford. He was convicted of common assault for that attack, and at the time he was on a suspended sentence for the petrol station incident. So I ain't got a clue how he didn't get a bit of time on remand at least, or a little stint in prison. It's a weird one, because later that year he punched a man in a Reading nightclub, and it's alleged that this man had only asked Dappy to stop talking to his girlfriend. It kind of mirrors a similar allegation of what the man at the petrol station said happened that led to the altercation. Dappy was arrested for this, and he was handed a 2-month suspended prison sentence, as well as being put on an electric tag. And the maddest thing is, while all this stuff's going on, Dappy goes on Celebrity Big Brother, and he has controversial moments on there, but he also wins over a lot of people. He forms a relationship with the eventual winner, Jim Davison, and it's a father-son type relationship. It was nice between the two of them. Dappy, I believe, finished as the runner-up on Big Brother. So maybe that would be the turn that sort of sorted out all this reckless behaviour for Dappy. No, it wasn't. Because in 2017, he did finally find himself in prison. Or at least on remand in prison. So basically, a big argument broke out at Dappy's house between him and his partner during a party. One thing after another, Dappy then appears with a butcher's knife. And this was confirmed not only by eyewitness accounts, but also by people that were filming it on their phones. He allegedly threatened multiple people. It was reported that he even threatened police officers once they arrived. But before he could confront them, they had to get to him. Between 10 and 20 police officers had to rock up to this mansion to be able to arrest Dappy, and they had to send armed police units. They eventually had to break down the door. So this was no small altercation. This was a big arrest. He was charged with possession of a weapon, he was charged with common assault, and he was also charged with threatening behaviour. He tried to apply for bail, but he got denied it, and he was immediately sent to HMP Peterborough, where he served about 6 weeks. The papers said that he got attacked inside a prison, but the papers say a lot of things. One thing for sure is that he definitely had an altercation inside a prison, or a fall, as some people would often call it, because he rocked up to court with a black eye. So whether he was attacked or not, he may have had a fight and he may have come out on top, but he definitely did get punched in the face, in my opinion. And in that court appearance, Dappy gets another suspended sentence. It's over. He's out of jail and he just needs to behave himself. So what happened in the time between Dappy's trial in 2017 until the band reunited in 2022? Well, I'll start off with Phaser, who I've spoken about the least. Probably a good thing, to be fair, because he hasn't found himself in all that much trouble. Well, in this period of time, he was producing. He made a few songs himself, but not all that many. He was more writing songs for other artists. He co-wrote a song for Jessie J. He spent time in the studio with Rita Ora, and apparently spent a lot of time in the studio also with Rihanna. And shortly after the band split, he declared himself bankrupt, or was declared bankrupt, but, you know, anyone in the know knows that being declared bankrupt and being skint are two kind of different things. Look, I've had a little look into Richard Rawson, aka Phaser, and He's an intelligent man. He's doing well for himself. He's definitely not bankrupt. He's got 4 kids, and he's in a very happy relationship that he has been in for 13 years. As for Dappy, he signed with a new management company when he was released from prison, and that's when he started releasing a lot of new music. He had a few more songs that charted, he was getting bookings for performances at festivals, but they weren't all going very well. He was booked to perform as a solo act at the Isle of Wight Festival, and apparently he had a 40-minute set. They said that he turned up 15 minutes late to the set, and then he went on stage, and apparently someone in the crowd was holding a "fuck Dappy" sign. He alerted everyone to made them kick him out, stuff like that, made a big drama of it or whatever, and basically they said he performed 3 songs, a total of about 10 minutes, and then he left. So 15 minutes late, on stage for about 10 minutes, and then leaves. So did 25 minutes out of a 40-minute booking or something like that. By the point when he was leaving the stage, he was getting booed really loudly. There was a lot of people that testified, well, not testified, but basically said that this definitely happened. Whereas Dappy said it didn't happen. And he said that the reason that they were booing was because the logistics team from the festival had fucked things up. Apparently, according to him, he was there on time, ready to perform, so who knows? One person's word against another's. But by 2018, he was having commercial success again, having used his versatility to almost lean into other genres of music when he dropped Oh My, which went platinum eventually. And that's the one thing that you can never say about Dappy, is that he's not versatile. I think he's really talented, and you can see from the rest of the band's musical endeavours once they split, it's clear for me to see that the melodies and the lyrics, at least for Dappy and Tulisa, probably came from him in the early days. But one thing that was for sure was by around 2020, Dappy definitely did not want to talk about N-Dubz anymore.
And Tulisa, of course, is your cousin. Did you grow up as close cousins?
Yeah.
Where did the conversation come in about the 3 of you doing music together?
He can't be fucked.
My dad died. He didn't get to see the rest of the success.
Right.
Yeah, but that's all. Don't even want to get into all of that.
Was it your dad that facilitated the
He
deal?
just said he don't want to get into it.
I think he died by that time.
When you're so young.
Don't like the way this interview's going, Double Man.
How come?
Because it's nothing but N-Dubz, bro.
No,
I feel it, bro.
What do you want to
I
speak
don't like
about?
N-Dubz. I don't want to talk about N-Dubz. When I went number 1 on my solo shit.
You've been signed.
When I went number 1.
Well,
No N-Dubz, no N-Dubz, no N-Dubz. Don't want to do it anymore, Double. It's making me mad, bro. Don't like it, bro.
Okay.
Simple.
So you want to skip everything
bro.
group related?
Right, I don't really have any context over the interviewer or the channel, but 2 things are going on at once here, aren't they? The interviewer knows that the views are in N-Dubz. That's why I'm making a video right now on N-Dubz and not Dappy's solo career post N-Dubz, yeah? So the interviewer knows that, and for that reason, he knows that he needs to try and get Dappy talking about N-Dubz a little bit. At the same time, Dappy don't want to talk about N-Dubz. He has made that clear to the interviewer, and I did actually see from the interview that this was a little bit far into the interview, so it wasn't like he's just stormed into the interview and given a bad attitude straight away. And like Dappy actually stated there, he had a successful solo career himself. He was the one that had produced a number 1 track. So the interviewer maybe, in my opinion, should have just moved on from the line of questioning, but at the same time, I'd be a snide to say that the interviewer wasn't asking questions or asking a line of questions that the audience would have actually wanted from that interview. So Phaser's doing well, Dappy's having commercial success, but don't want to fucking talk about N-Dubz. And what about Tulisa? Well, Tulisa had some more ups and downs. One of these actually turned into somewhat of an up rather than a down eventually, but it started off as a down because will.i.am from the Black Eyed Peas basically just ripped her off because Tulisa co-wrote and recorded a track called I Don't Give a Fuck, and this was the track.
Bring the action.
When you hear this in a club, you're gonna turn the shit up. You're gonna turn the shit up. You're gonna turn the shit up.
Cause we scream and shout
And let it all out.
scream and shout and let it out.
Where have I I heard that one before. Oh yeah, will.i.am and Britney Spears tune, Scream and Shout.
Bring the action.
When you hear this in the club, you're gonna turn the shit up.
Scream and shout and let it all out.
It's not like will.i.am to rip someone else's music off, is it? Never heard him accused of doing that before. Anyway, what happened was the producers of the track itself had originally put it to Tulisa. She had wrote the lyrics for the tune and she had recorded the rough edit, stuff like that. In the end, they basically decided that they didn't want to give Tulisa the tune, which was fine. Tulisa wasn't that bothered by it. But will.i.am heard the song. He loved it and he wanted to put his own twist on it, which in the industry is pretty common, so it wouldn't have been all that much of a problem. The problem was the fact that he teamed up with Britney Spears to do it, he used Tulisa's lyrics, and then, when it eventually got properly looked into, it got discovered that the reason why many people said that it sounded like Britney Spears was singing in somewhat of a British accent was because of the fact that Tulisa, completely uncredited on the song, was featured in the song. Her original vocals, very lowly, were being played as Britney Spears was singing. And because of all of this, after a 5-year legal battle, eventually Tulisa wins the case. She receives a good amount of money in backdated royalties that had been accumulated over a 5-year period. And I'm very glad for her that she did. Listen, I'm not painting Tulisa as an angel here, by the way, but what I'm saying is, I think that Tulisa created way less of the problems that she suffered for herself than, let's say, Dappy did. I think she got fucked over multiple times by multiple people who at a young age she maybe felt like she could have trusted. And there will be people that will say, well, hold on, she still gave someone else's number who was able to deal them a bit of gear, and hold on, she still let herself be filmed doing a sex act and stuff like that. And I'm gonna tell you, that's not that uncommon. It's not that uncommon for people that have grown up on council estates around rough areas of London to know drug dealers. It's not that uncommon for partners to film each other doing intimate things. It's more uncommon for it to get out there, of course. And I'm not saying that all partners do it. I don't do it myself. But what I'm saying is, it's not the wildest thing in the world, is it? It's not Epstein's Island type shit, is it? What it actually is behaviour that's irresponsible. Again, there was a lot of poor judgment there. There was the fact that she probably forgot at times that she was a role model. I'm specifically talking about her giving the undercover Sheikh the number, by the way. I think the sex tape thing was just a scummy thing from that MC Ultra guy to release. But I will admit, the same way that I held Dappy accountable, Tulisa was a role model as well, and she should have probably done a little bit better, but who the fuck am I to judge, let's be honest. And for a few years after that, N-Dubz, in my opinion, finally actually started to get forgotten about. Many kids just knew Dappy as his own artist. That same age group probably didn't even know Fraser. And Tulisa was doing a bit of TV work while working on her own health struggles at the time. But then out of the blue, in May 2022, the band announced that they would be ending their 11-year hiatus and coming back with new music and new tours. The first song they put out peaked at number 33 in the UK charts, so nowhere near the success that they originally had, but the album that they made once they got back together did reach number 6 in the UK charts and number 1 in the urban charts. It made them good money. Really good money. But what made even better money would be the tours. Because once they announced the 10 dates for their tours, they sold over 200,000 tickets in the first 10 minutes. That's ridiculous. That's absolutely mental. For N-Dubz to be able to do those sort of numbers is huge. They had to add 14 more dates off the back of it, and that would probably mean that the tour was a success. Not quite. There were two specific events where the band actually cancelled going on stage right before they were about to go out. In one instance, the fans had already queued up, got into the venue, listened to all the warm-up acts, things like that, paid for drinks, and then, as N-Dubz were about to come out, they were just stood there waiting, and they didn't come out. And it was only later that they announced that Dappy had had a medical issue and wasn't able to perform, and that's why they didn't come out. I think a lot of fans were very, very, very disappointed that the guys didn't even take to the stage to just say it or whatever. I mean, Tulisa, she could have just come out and performed Young on her own or whatever, but I don't know. There was another show that also got cancelled, and after that tour, Tulisa announced that once again they did plan on returning, but not until 2027. The rumour has it that the tickets for the two shows that I actually spoke about have still not been refunded, so let's see how the return goes. And that's pretty much it. The story of N-Dubz is a story of creative chaos, basically. Talent, hard work, controversies, but also adversities. They came about, they made a massive cultural impact, as well as releasing loads of music that did well, and unlike your typical rise and fall video, despite the controversial elements, all of them are still doing well, which actually makes me quite happy to be able to cover a video like this, because I don't always want it to be doom and gloom. I liked these lot N-Dubz, but you tell me if I'm wrong. Let me know in the comments section below if you want to see more videos like this, what you want to see coming out from the channel next. I've got so many ideas up in my head and I need to get them on the screen and up on YouTube. Listen, people, if you've made it to the end of the video, then please do one thing for me. You've watched about an hour and a half. It's going to take you 1 second. Just like the video, share the video, subscribe, hype the video, do all of that because it's helping me out massively if you can. I love you all very much. I will see you all in the next one.